Experience hospitality the Northwest way at the Everglades Hotel. Located on the banks of the River Foyle, the Everglades Hotel is just minutes from the centre of Derry, London Derry, with free on-site guest car parking. Whether you're here for a family meal, a big celebration, or simply a peaceful retreat, we'll make your experience as memorable as the sights in the city. Visit Everglades Hotel Derry for accommodation bookings, the latest menus, live shows and events, and much, much more. See you there.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Gaelic Lives podcast. We have an extremely busy show for you this morning as we're looking back at all the action from the weekend, and there was plenty of it. And I suppose we'll start with the big Ulster game. That was the real Ulster focus at the weekend. That was Cavan against Donegal. And Mal, I suppose this one was a bit of maybe a strange one in the fact that it made the case to Shawnee Johnson in our preview show that if you were talking about a team going into this game having won a game and one having lost a game, you would think it was the opposite way about. But it was Cavan going in here looking their second win, and Donegal were looking their first. So a bit of a strange build up to it, but Donegal come out convincingly on top then in the end.
Yeah, they looked too, Sean, and I suppose a lot of it was centred around, as a lot of managers talk about now, energy levels. They just seem to be on it. And the other thing is that they had a wider range of scores. Like the week before, it was like Murphy and Langan, and they carried the can fairly much for Donegal. But I suppose the concern would be that Sean Patton's still not available now. Wasn't listening to any interviews yet from this game at all, but to know what the lie of the land is. But they want to get him back sharpish because of just everything that he brings to their game. And I suppose when you see the team news, lads, it was sort of strange that Dara O'Brien had got dropped, because he was probably borderline their most important player. So maybe there's a precaution, or maybe it was just a decision to freshen things up. But certainly a very important result for Donegal to get back on the horse again. And I suppose with the Tyrone and Mayo game, it just leaves this group completely up for grabs in terms of the way it sits at the moment. But I think there'll probably be a sense of relief in Donegal that they're able just to get another couple of points, because I think the Tyrone result would have hurt them badly. And then the question marks start to appear of, well, was it too difficult to prioritise a good start to the league and then target an Ulster? So now they've got a chance to go at it again. And from Cavan's point of view, it's probably a disappointing enough performance. They only racked up 113, I think it was, the scoreline. You see that many scorelines over the weekend, you sometimes start seeing them in your sleep. But they had a stronger pack back, like James Smith, Killian Clark were back in the 26. Paddy Lynch also got playing again, but it's all up for grabs. And I suppose, as Niall has told us on a good few occasions, just that whole tradition of they haven't beat them since 1983. Like it's an amazing statistic, and they're now feeding into that now. But probably just an important result for Donegal, Sean, just to get them up and running again, more than anything.
Yeah, no, it does feel like that, doesn't it? That Donegal, we know that they weren't going to go away. They're still top of Ireland contenders, but it was important for them to go to Brafty Park and, I suppose, not only get a win, but to really send out a statement that they haven't gone away.
Yeah, I was just thinking after the win over Cavan, that maybe in the long run, not defeat the Tyrone might be the best thing that's ever happened to them. I mean, it's hard to go a whole campaign from the first round Ulster to All Ireland final day unbeaten. And I know even from some of Tyrone's All Ireland successes, it was probably the losses that end up defining their season. So that's obviously looking at things from a very glass half full perspective, from a Donegal perspective, that the win or defeat the Tyrone might stand them in good stead further down the line. But yeah, no, I was reading quotes from Jim McGuinness this morning, where he couldn't help but harp back in the Tyrone game. Well, in fairness, he was probably asked about it, and he did acknowledge that there was a fair bit of soul searching done, and he didn't use the Ulster final as an excuse either, because he pointed out that they played Tyrone in similar circumstances last year, and they were far too strong for Tyrone, having beaten Armagh last year's final as well. So Yeah, positive performance from Donegal perspective. Lots of good performances. Michael Murphy was imperious. Conor O'Donnell, Hugh McFadden in the middle. You'd Owen Van Gallagher coming into things. Sean Patton's still missing, so it'll be interesting to see when he comes back in, because I think they'll need him if they are to launch an all-out assault on Sam, so to speak. And then on the flip side, very disappointing from a Cavan perspective. That defeat really burst your bubble after their opening round victory over Mayo, particularly the second half performance. They did okay in the first half, but they just seemed to fall aside in the second half. And as Mal said, they're 1-13, particularly under new rules, isn't great scoring. And if they lose I suppose it depends how results go elsewhere, but if they lose the Throne, well, depends how Donegal Mayo game goes, but it's hard to see them getting the win over Throne, just given that record.
I suppose when we're on the subject of Tyrone, I'll stay with you. Just such a disappointing one, I suppose, for Tyrone. And I know I'll reflect back on our previous show again. Shawnee Johnson, he didn't go all the way to tip Mayo, but he was the only one I heard all week that gave Mayo a real fighting chance. And as it turned out, Mayo they turned up and they won the game.
Yeah, I suppose it shows the fickleness of a lot of punditry, barring our friend Shawnee Johnson there, that Mayo are being written off right, left and centre. They played in the league final not that long ago. They were beaten by a point or two by Galway in the provincial final. Didn't become a bad team overnight. And yeah, disappointing from a Throne perspective, undoubtedly. A win, and they would have been well on their way to topping the group. And I suppose it had been such a great week for Throne. They won the Ulster Minor final, won the All-Ireland Under-20 final. Then a couple of days before that, they beat Donegal and Ballybuffet, and their ducks were all in a row, and the bubble was burst against Mayo. It's hard to put your finger on it. I suppose there were a couple of extenuating factors. Maybe the fact Mayo had an extra week's break. Mayo, it was nearly do or die territory from a Mayo perspective. Throne are missing Brian Kennedy in the middle. Major loss. Brian's really going into a massive team leader. I suppose is exemplified by the fact he's captain. Paddy Tally wasn't available either. I would expect both of those men to be back ahead of the Cavan game. I'd say that the fact that they didn't play was precautionary as much as anything else after just shipping knocks against the Donegal. So I'd say they're probably just taking 2 or 3 weeks out and they'll be playing against Cavan. But yeah, it's hard to put your finger on it. I suppose from a Mayo perspective, there was a sense of circling the wagons. Like Kevin McStay obviously suffered a medical episode. Stephen Rochford was back in line. He made some brave calls. There were, I think, 2 lads made the championship debut. David Neary came on as a sub, and geez, he was nearly in the reckoning for player of the match. He did that well. Then from a Tyrone perspective, Dark Hanneman scored a cracking goal early in the second half, and you're thinking this is it. This will light the touch paper and a comeback, but it just didn't really happen, and hopefully we can chalk it down to one of those days. I know there's quite a bit of disappointment in Throne circles. You can't help reading the commentary online, and I suppose people are scratching their heads a wee bit after they were so good against Mayo. But I'd make the point that Throne's been going reasonably well since the very early stages of the league. The bad defeat, coincidentally, the Mayo down in Castlebar. You're only beaten by a point or two, but there wasn't a great performance. And since then, they've been tipping along rightly. So hopefully it was a bit of a one-off, Sean.
It just throws that group again. Mal Cavan beating Mayo through the group wide open, and now Mayo beating Tyrone. It means everybody could be fighting for that top spot on the last day.
It does. It's you talk about dead rubbers, and sometimes you're sort of waiting for a group where everybody's going to the same amount of points, but they're both neutral, aren't they? The venues, am I right with that? Yeah. So that's maybe a factor as well. But like, it's probably disappointing from Tyrone's point of view because they got themselves into the box seat to get top spot, and I do fully believe the top spot's really important. You know, if you look at Armagh, you'll probably touch on it, Sean. You can actually sit back and think a couple of steps ahead. But another factor, and Niall hinted at it there, and I think he's bang on. You see, whenever a team has to come out swinging, like that's a major thing, because like Tyrone, your eyes maybe slightly off it, and sometimes if it's slightly off it, you can end up, you know, on the floor essentially. Whereas Mayo, and then obviously like our thoughts go out to Kevin McStay, because as much as footballs are very, very important to us all. His health's everything, and we just hope has a speedy recovery. I interviewed him a couple of times and comes across as a decent chap to talk to. So you just hope that he's back sooner rather than later involved in football again. But that group's wide open. But Thrones probably still can top it, because you would feel that if they beat Cavan, they would have Donegal on the head-to-head, unless there's another U-turn. But sure, we love U-turns.
Anything could happen, and we're well used to that. So that's Group 1. I suppose we'll move to Group 3, and I was lucky enough to be in Newry on Saturday night to witness Down beating Louth by a point, and I don't know if we can call it a classic, because for 45 minutes it felt like Down were going to cruise this and win by, if it wasn't going to be 9 or 10, it was certainly going to be 5 or 6. But the new rules just mean that the game's never over, and Down did go 9 points ahead. They were 9 up at, I think it was 9 up at half time, and they went 9 up again about 20 minutes left. And Louth just stroked over a series of 2-pointers. I think they got 3 in about 3 or 4 minutes. Sam Mulroy, Craig Lennon, and Tommy Dernan. And suddenly they're just right back in it. And there was such a good atmosphere. There was over 10,000 in Newry on Saturday night. And it was just one of them real championship days that it felt everything was on the line. And it probably was for both teams. We'll talk about, I suppose, how the group's going to pan out. But it did feel like that. And it was summed up in the last play that Down a point up, waiting for the hooter. We're keeping the ball. Eugene Brannigan tried to play a wee ball inside, the one sort of ball we've seen him play against Donegal, and he overdone it, and it went over the sideline. There was about 15 seconds left, so Louth were scrambling to get the kick out before the hooter sounded. They got it out, hooter goes, and they've one last play, and it falls to Tommy Dernan, who is well within scoring range to get a point to level it up. But Adam Crimmins just comes out of nowhere, throws his body on Tommy Dernan's foot and blocks the ball, and it spills out to Finn Murdoch, and he boots it out over the sideline, and it's game over. And it was just so enjoyable, such a good atmosphere. And then of course you have the Down fans streaming onto the field after. And Mal, I know this game wasn't live on our Down GATV, did do audio coverage of it, but I'm sure you've seen the block, and it was just one of them magical championship moments.
Yeah, I saw the block, Sean, and I think it's actually great now whenever people clip things like that and put them on social media, and I think Geezer actually highlighted an interview, I think possibly with Tommy Rooney a few weeks ago, where it's always about the top scorer. Like sometimes, there's moments like that. Like that block was brilliant. Conor Doherty did one. Ross McQuillan's tackle on Dara Canavan a few weeks ago. Conor Gleeson did an unbelievable save from Paul Casty yesterday. All these moments need to be celebrated, and I think this is what probably us in the media need to do, is highlight things like that, because it's exceptional. And that's what I was going to ask you, Sean. What would the percentage of the attendance been? 50-50 or mainly Down? Because we did sort of make the point on here that this Down team was crying out for the fans to get behind them, and the fans were probably crying out for a team that was really going to give them something. So what was it like?
It was hard to tell, Mark, because everybody's wearing red. It was hard to tell by looking around, but I would say slightly maybe in Down's favour, but it was close to 50-50, I would think. And it's worth mentioning too, the game was delayed 10 minutes as well, just because of the throngs of people that were coming in. So I suppose it's just one of those championship days that there was so much on the line. And now I suppose that's the key thing now for Down, is the 2 points means they're top of the table going into the final round, and obviously they've Monaghan in a neutral venue. It's going to be unbelievably tough to see who goes through to the quarterfinals.
I can't wait for the final round in general, Sean. It's got a real Super Saturday or Super Sunday feel about it, So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how Down get on in that game. It's the way they're going. It wouldn't surprise me if they pulled off a bit of an upset against Monaghan. I just thought if they had a fatal flaw, it was maybe just up front, because they were really good against Donegal and Ulster, but just didn't seem to have the firepower to be able to pull it off, But if they manage to sort that out, who knows where they could go in the coming weeks, Sean.
Yeah, it's exciting times anyway for Down, and I caught up with Caolan Mooney after the game, so we're going to hear from Caolan now, and we'll have a quick word from our sponsors too, and then we'll be back in part 2. Caolan, sum up your thoughts after that, a crazy game.
Oh, here. If you're a neutral coming to watch that there, you'd be on the edge of your seats in enjoyment. But look, on our end, you're just absolutely delighted to get over the line. Boys have put in a first shift over, it's probably this last 3 years since Louth come in, so it's good to get over that line just towards the end when pressure was on. We were able to come back from it.
I think it was at your point, but there's 9 points up, Caolan, and it looked like you're just going to see this out.
I can't remember what happened at that stage, but you're not even looking at the score, you're just trying to go by the minute after minute, and Jesus Christ, it came right down to the last minute. Crimmins getting the wee block in there just to see out loud. So look, it doesn't matter what happens and what stage and many points you're up, it's not over until the whistle goes, and that proved that today.
That's the joy of the 2 pointers, isn't it? You were on the wrong side of it today, obviously, but the 2 pointers, that's just, the game's never over.
I suppose that's why the rules have come in, is to take out that blanket defence, and look, it showed today that us in the first half and Louth that in the second half it's paying its purpose to the game. It's adding a bit of excitement. You don't know if someone's breaking through, they're going to go in for 1 or they're going to go for 2, so you have that option, and it's good to see.
I suppose, there's such a look at the fans out here, the crowd here. There's over 10,000 here today. There's such a feel-good factor around down at the minute, and that's 2 wins in a row now.
Look here, we're not too concerned about what's around us in the stands, but it's good to see support coming out. But look, again, we're just more delivering what's on the pitch. You can do what you want. If the crowds are coming or not, and you don't do the performance, you're not doing them any justice. So we can just perform in the pitch, and hopefully they come out to support us. And look, they're coming out in their thousands now.
Monaghan next, probably going to be, we don't know the Monaghan result obviously, but probably going to be a top of the table clash and a shootout for the quarterfinals.
Again, you're sort of taking it the purpose as much as group stages, but every championship game's a championship game. It's, regardless if you take it as a league or a knockout, we're taking every game that comes as if it's a knockout game and you have to win. So we'll go in and go look over what Monaghan bring today and go to the training pitch on Tuesday and just see what we can do to counteract what they're bringing.
Experience hospitality the Northwest way at the Everglades Hotel. Located on the banks of the River Foyle, the Everglades Hotel is just minutes from the centre of Derry, Londonderry, with free on-site guest car parking. Whether you're here for a family meal, a big celebration, or simply a peaceful retreat, we'll make your experience as memorable as the sights in the city. Visit Everglades Hotel Derry for accommodation bookings, the latest menus, live shows and events, and much, much more. See you there.
So
Sean,
also
Sean, were you in Lacey's nightclub there? Because the boombox was flying.
that was party atmosphere in down, man.
Class.
So it was before and after the game, it's worth adding.
Absolute class.
But I suppose the game itself meant so much because of how we knew Monaghan was probably going to beat Clare, was the big thing in that group, Mal, and that's the way it turned out. Now, I was in Croke Park on Sunday and just checking scores every now and then, and I couldn't believe Monaghan were actually down at half time against Clare, but obviously they come back and they won it, and it leaves, as we'd mentioned, everything up for grabs in the last day.
I actually didn't realise how far behind they were, and there was a lot of talk on Clare, obviously surrounding Peter Keane and comments made after the game. Was he taking them forward or all that type of thing? So they must have came with a performance, Sean, as well, because Clonus and Monaghan is a pretty tough gig for anybody, and I think it probably shows the class of Monaghan. And again, just from watching Sunday night's footage, that probably doesn't give you were able to taste the atmosphere and at the down game, whereas this one here, you're going by telly. But Conor McCarthy got through for a couple of goal chances, the first one they took. Thankfully, he's moved into attack, and he's still down as a defender in the fantasy league. You've got to always look for this. Tommy Dernan was in my fantasy team, so curse Adam Crimmins. But they seem to have played Conor McCarthy nearly at centre half forward, right half forward now. So they must feel that they've got a decent balance in defence where they need an extra body being that runner. And I suppose he made his trade, Sean, as being a forward. We probably would have associated him as being a forward, so it just shows you the flexibility. And I think they might have had one change from the previous week. I think it was Big Jack McCarron was in, and he threw a couple of nice wee dummies to kick them into the Rosslea end. I saw them last night on telly, and I think Rory Beggan maybe chipped in with 5 points, I think, as well. So they've got a good range in there. So I hope the Down and Monaghan game doesn't clash with Derry and Dublin, because I'd love to love to go to it. But it'll be some game. Like there's Monaghan and there's Down, and two teams that love scoring and are entertaining their fans and bringing a bit of excitement to it. So that'll be one hell of a game.
Now, I suppose from Monaghan point of view, I think there were 9-point winners in the end, but the fact that they did get a test, that they sort of had to come back and fight for it instead of just, pulling up, it probably leaves them in better stead heading into the break and the down clash.
Yeah, it'll do them no harm. And as I said last time, they're a team that's still slipping very much under the radar, I think. There's not that much chat about them. And if they beat Down, they obviously top of the table into an All-Ireland quarter-final and brilliant position to be in. And they seem to be going really well under Gabriel Bannigan. And I know when he came in, I saw a few comments online sort of suggesting that, it's not a particularly big name appointment, but, he's doing a brilliant job. There's no doubt about it.
Certainly, he's brought them on. Definitely, they're one of the. I think we mentioned last week that they're maybe not going to win the Ireland, but they're certainly going to have a big say later on in the knockout stages of the competition. And man, I suppose that'll bring us to Group 4 then. And I know you were in Celtic Park on Sunday for Derry and Galway, and I think you'd mentioned last week that still the only point that Derry got all year, the only game that they didn't lose was the Galway game in the league. And it's the same in the championship so far. They picked up a draw and really should have won this game, man.
Should have won it, and the next 5 or 6 minutes of debate isn't going to do it justice. It was one hell of a game. You're always biased when you're at the game because you can, as I say, you can really get a feel for it. But this was brilliant in every single way. The only thing it didn't have was a winner. It probably looked like it was going to be Derry for a long, long time. They were 8 points ahead on a couple of occasions, and they just, if you strip it all back, now there's a few things tactically they improved on, but when you strip it all back, they played like a team that were playing for each other, for their manager, for the management. They were playing like they really needed to win, and that was number one ingredient. The other thing is, and I've said it on here a few times, they've never been able to knit a few decent passages together to last the pace. Now, there were 13 points down against Armagh. They certainly had a wee bit more control about them this time, but probably a couple of turning points, a sideline ball was possibly questionable, and it ended up with a goal, and that goal probably turned it, albeit Peter Cook coming on and Damien Comer made a brilliant impact for Galway, it has to be said. And then there's probably a messy enough goal they give away at the end where, Ben McKinless shouldn't have probably left his lane. And like John Maher is an awful beast of a man. You'd love him to have him in your team. And he just flicked the ball back across and Matthew Tierney flicked it into the net. And funny, you can see Paul McFlynn, the Derry selector, behind the goals, and he's his head in his hands. And just right beside him, the Galway kit man, he's bouncing up and down. And all you could think about as a Derry person was the Kerry game, because it was the same end of the pitch. It was the same level of control. And it was like goals again. Like Derry have conceded 25 goals this season. Like 25. That's crazy stuff. Like, and it's not all goalkeeping issue, it's just collectively. But the one thing I would say about the game, like you won't sum it up here. It's just impossible. But in the last play, when the final goal, and then Conor Doherty and Kieran McFall clashed with each other trying to go for the ball, and you can see the body language of they're bound to think, "Oh no, not again," because against Kerry, then they went and leaked another goal. But to be fair to Ben McKinless, he got his kick away to Dermot Baker, and I think Conor Doherty, who ended up scoring the equaliser, was involved in the move a couple of times. When you think back to his face when that goal went in, so there must be something in there where there's a wee bit more composure that they didn't have any other time this year, because as much as they controlled it, they could have lost it. And then, like, the man of the moment was Conor Glass, and like probably it's really a good example for underage. Like, he had a shot in front of goal, he didn't take it. Conor Doherty was in a better position. He worked the ball and he took he took the score. But a fantastic game. Probably from Derry's point of view, Brenton Rodgers and Conor Glass were they were immense in that middle third. Like, Conor scored 1-3, but the time Sean Kelly had a goal chance, went over the bar. When you watch it back last night, that Conor Glass was back with a near hand tackle on Sean Kelly that, you know, the goal wasn't really on. So there's both sides of his game. And finally, for me on this is, it's probably they're probably, as much as they haven't won a game, they're getting a wee bit of form back. Paul Cassidy, Ethan Doherty, and Niall Loughlin was actually a really good outlet for them. And then you've got likes of Dan Higgins wouldn't have an awful lot of championship experience. He plucked an important kick out of the stage. So there's a lot to be positive about, but at the same thing, and Paddy admitted it, and most Derry people you met at Celtic Park, like, it felt like a defeat. You know, and then all of a sudden you're trying to think what happens now, but it obviously sets them up with a basically winner takes all game with Dublin. Although I think a draw would do Dublin, but that's not the way it works. It's winner takes all. So that's something to look forward to in a couple of weeks' time. But I know this is an Ulster-based pod here, but there's probably a lot of question marks around Galway now, because we would have been on here talking about who would potentially win, Sam, and we fall into the trap every week of going like week by week analysis, like Tyrone were good one week and they're all of a sudden not the next week, same with Donegal. So you have to be careful, but they just don't seem to be clicking right, you know, and I would be a team who would have fancied them. So definitely a few question marks there, but a bit of progress for Derry.
Who's that? It just feels from the outside. Anyway, I know Mal has a better grasp of Derry. He was going to all their games and stuff, but it certainly feels from the outside they're just nearly waiting on that one win, and it's gonna spark something for them. But it's just about getting over the line.
Yeah, that's all it takes. Sorry, but my phone rang just there. Johnny McIntosh column time, but they need some sort of a win, and that was their best chance. Like, that definitely was. But I think the most important thing was they didn't lose it. I think that's the most important thing. I missed your question there, but I got the gist of what you're trying to say there. But the most important thing is they didn't lose it.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing, and it gives them still a fighting chance going into the final round. And as I mentioned earlier, I was in Croke Park on Sunday to see Armagh beat Dublin, and it was a funny old game. It didn't reach the heights that, you know, I think the build up we all thought it was going to. Dublin started really well. They were 6-3 up and will probably come to their wide count, but when they were 6-3 up, I was jotting down notes, and I wrote down that their wides were keeping Armagh in touch, because the Sunday game showed them there was one Larkin O'Dell straight in front of the post, two Colin Bascale straight in front of the posts going wide. Sean Bugler dropped a comfortable shot short. So when it was 6-3, Armagh were still there, but it really should have been about 10-3. Such was Dublin's dominance in the first 10 minutes, but Roy Grugan got man of the match, and it was sort of his 2-point score that got Armagh ticking again, and Ross McQuillan got one and got a point. Sorry, and all of a sudden it was level, and Armagh scored 7 points in a row, and suddenly they're in the driver's seat, and they just kept Dublin at arm's length in the second half. It just felt, unless Dublin could have got a goal, which they never really looked like yet, and it felt like Armagh were just going to see this out, and without really breaking sweat or getting out of maybe third gear. Obviously the Rian O'Neill factor was huge for, you know, the 2-point scores, probably his first one. I know there was a lot of talk on Twitter. It should be worth 4 points how far out he was, but now I suppose from an Armagh point of view, they're now through to the Lion quarterfinals for the third year in a row. They've topped the group of death. They've done it with a game in hand. I don't know, speaking to Geezer after the game, he said they're not taking the foot off the gas. They're going to try to beat Galway, but they have the luxury now.
That's great. That's great to hear.
they have the luxury now of, you know, giving their injured players some game time. You know, Niall Grimley, Joe McElroy, Aaron McKay's coming back, Aidan Falker's coming back, Oisin O'Neill too. We're probably going to see them players go into that Galway game possibly starting to get 60 minutes under their belts, but it's a great position for Armagh to be in.
Yeah, I suppose as much as it pains me to admit that, Sean, as a throw man, they do show a lot of resilience. Like, that's the second year in a row they've topped an extremely difficult group after losing Ulster final and, I suppose, gut-wrenching circumstances. Yesterday, I saw John Fogarty tweet this morning. I'm always harping on about these things I see online. I need to use the phone less. I think that Dublin had put on 4 subs before Kieran McGeeney reached into his bench. And that's despite the fact that Armagh have such a strong panel. So they're in a brilliant position. They can afford to take it. I'll not say take it handy against Galway, but obviously run their panel a bit more. And yeah, they're going extremely well, and their consistency levels over recent years have been remarkable. Like, I think it was still that Tyrone game back in 2023 that they was last time they lost within that 70 minutes in Championship football. So they're right in the conversation. And some Armagh supporters think they're not getting the credit they deserve, but I think most people recognise them as serious contenders for Sam again.
Sean,
Yeah.
if I could just ask you something, because you're hosting the pod and sometimes you don't get a chance to get your point across. I've sat beside you at a few Armagh games, one on penalty shootouts in the press box, and I can just sense the level of nerve because a couple of finals Derry were in where you're just absolutely on the edge of your seats. But is there a feeling among Armagh people now going to games, stopping at the Apple Green, wherever you chat in the pub after? Is there a case of you know exactly what you're going to get from Armagh now? Every time you go to a game, I don't know if that's the right way to put it. Are the fans less nervous now? Is there nearly an acceptance that there's never going to be panic, or has anything changed for you?
It just feels, Mal, I know speaking to a few people at the game, before the game yesterday, like we were, I wouldn't say confident of beating Dublin, but everybody felt that, yeah, Armagh was going to win this game. I suppose Conor Callahan being out was one of the big factors. But yeah, there's definitely a confidence nearly. We know what Armagh have, and it feels like they're, whether they go back to back or not, we're probably it's too early to be looking that far ahead. But there's just confidence that Armagh, if they don't win the Ireland, it's going to take a serious team to beat them. And there's no longer that fear going to Dublin. There's no longer that fear going to Croke Park. That they'd reached the quarterfinals in 2014. Donegal beat them by a point. They were there in 2017, and Tyrone hammered them. And it was just that, like, getting there was great and all, but now it's nearly like you get there and you expect that maybe not to win, but as you say, they're going to be right there. They're almost. It's very hard to beat Armagh at this stage, and we've seen that in Ulster the last couple of years. And you mentioned them couple of penalty shootouts, extra time. It's just got to the stage where if you're not performing, if one of the players isn't performing in the field, like you have Stephen Campbell coming on there, as I mentioned, the 4 or 5 injured boys still coming back, so they're in a really, really healthy, strong position, and I think that's just. The Armagh fans are loving it at the minute with enough dark days. I think they're just going to enjoy this while it lasts. And I think that's the big thing about the group of death and these days out in Croke Park is they don't last forever. Armagh fans know that. Like the Ulster finals have proven that there is going to be dark days too. But I think Armagh fans are just going to enjoy it while it lasts, because it won't last forever. Hopefully it lasts a couple of more years and a couple of more weeks this year, but we'll see how it all pans out. We're going to head to our highlights then, just before we hear the rest of our interviews to close the show. Our player of the week, Mal, you've went with Conor Glass. I suppose you spoke to him in your roundup there, how effective he was for Derry against Galway.
Yeah, he's just all round game, and he's just his all round temperament, and probably, to quote Tiernan Flanagan, one of the Glen lads, what he described Conor Glass, he says he's just a brilliant teammate. And that's how he described him. And I think that's what you'd want. Somebody who, a bit like you say about Armagh, you sort of know what you're going to get, and you sort of always know what you're going to get with Conor.
And now you went with Conor O'Donnell for Donegal.
Yeah, it was hard to pick a player this week because there were not many games and quite a number of Ulster victories. But I went for Conor because he scored 1-4 against Cavan and was very good by all accounts. I'll just give a quick mention of Fermanagh and Antrim as well. Like Fermanagh had booked their quarter-final spot in the Tailteann Cup, went over Wexford, so fair play to them. And Antrim got a great win over London as well, to sneak into the knockout. So I thought I'd just give them a mention too, Sean.
Yeah, it's good to see them two teams progressing as well. And just on our players of the week, I went with Rory Grugan. Thought he was brilliant for Armagh. And he got 8 points. I suppose it was the headline grabber, but his defensive work as well. He put in a brilliant block on a brilliant tackle in the space of a couple of minutes, and they both resulted in points at the other end. So a great shift from Rory Grugan. And our results of the week now, me and you both picked Downs win over Louth, and I suppose I rounded up earlier on how big of a win it was, but it was an eye-catching one, a 1-point win.
Yeah, definitely. Particularly given the way it ended with that brilliant block, I heard it was such a good block, but sometimes these things get exaggerated a wee bit. But when you saw the clip, it really was Conor Gormley-esque.
And your result of the week then, Mal, you went for Antrim's win over London.
Yeah, I have to admit I expected them to win, but and probably they would have expected to win, but it was such a big result, Sean, because they offered so much against Armagh, and then they didn't follow it up. And I think they needed to win by a considerable margin because of score difference. And I think between Dominic McInhill, Ryan McQuillan, and Paddy McBride, they scored 113 between them. So that was really important. And I think now the only disadvantage, because I think they have to go to Wexford this weekend, but if you had asked them last week, they would have took it. They would have took it all day long. So a significant result for Antrim.
I'll stay with you then, Mal, for the shock of the week. I went for the exact same ones you did. It was Mayo beating Tyrone.
I have to admit, it was just, I felt Tyrone were starting to turn the corner, and I'm not saying that they're not going to turn back onto it, but the fact that I just thought that they were at home and they were really built on the win over Donegal. I think that's what probably cemented my opinion of making them favourites and why it was such a shock. But there'll be plenty more shocks down the line. That's the good thing about it.
And your shock of the week then, you went for Derry's draw with Galway, a draw in the end.
Yeah, I just went for it as a shock, given how it all ended up. I thought Derry were virtually home and host until that late goal, and probably did well to get anything out of it in the final reckoning, Sean.
And Mel, me and you both agreed on our score of the week as well. It was Ryan O'Neill's 2-pointer, which if anybody didn't see the game, it was all over Twitter, and I think it was from outside the 45. It's maybe 55 metres out from goal.
Aye, brilliant point, and a lovely flight to the ball as well. And I think as he kicked it, he was slightly off balance, so it was a brilliant score, and it's one of the many reasons why it's a good thing from a Maw perspective that he's back on the panel.
And score of the week, Mal, you went for Thomas Brady for Derry.
Yeah, there were 5 or 6 different ones written down here, but I went for Thomas Brady because I was at the game and could see it right away. Dead had just conceded a goal, and on the next puck out, he got the ball. He worked it to John Mullen, his colleague, and he got it back, and like he nearly no right to go for goal. And I tweeted the goal up on socials during the weekend. Like it was just such a strike into the top corner, and as we're finding out this weekend, there's so many games, it's very hard to sum them all up. There's so many options, but what a shot from Brady. Unfortunately, from Derry's point of view, they didn't play well enough on the day to translate it into silverware, but what a goal it was.
I'll stay with you, Mal, because we've picked the same unsung hero. It's Adam Cribbins. I think we've said enough about him, but he definitely deserves this one this week.
Yeah, I think he didn't make his championship debut until coming on against Donegal, and he scored 5 points since, I think. And like I think he's Mayo Bridges' club. I have to admit I hadn't heard about him until about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and he kicked a point off either foot the other night. And when the game was on the fire, and when Tommy Durnan could almost see a draw, he came from nowhere to make that block. And fair play to him, and it's great. And hopefully it inspires a lot more people to celebrate the blocks and the hooks and all the other big moments in the games, because it was massive, and he's got hopefully a good future ahead of him.
And now finally then, your unsung hero, you went for Niall Loughlin of Derry.
Yeah, he's not really a big game or a big name, sorry, but he had an excellent performance against Galway. He scored 1-2, and it was just a bundle of energy. So I thought I'd give Niall a wee nod.
So that's all we have for this week's folks. We're going to wrap up with 2 interviews from Paddy Tally of Derry and Kieran McGeeney of Armagh, and that'll bring our show to an end. We'll be back as usual on Thursday and back next Monday as well, so make sure for everybody to tune in, and thanks for tuning in this morning, and thanks to Niall and Mal for giving us all their thoughts.
Thanks, lad.
Thanks, Sean.
Paddy,
another dramatic draw, another dramatic day. You could have lost it, you could have won it. Neither. So what's the thoughts?
I lost it. I thought that the thoughts are immediately we should have won that game. We were 8 points up in a really good position and didn't close it out. That's disappointing.
How pleased are you with the overall performance? Because you were on top, as you say, for so long of that game.
You'd be happy with the way the attitude is good and a lot of really good football, but like you play in a position to get yourself exactly. You're 8 points better team. It wasn't as if, like, I think Galway got 2 goals in the first half, but apart from that, we were a better team. So we looked, and then when we pushed out 8 in the second half, we really are on top here. Like, but to concede those scores, like, they had a few boys come off the bench, made a difference to them, but it's just disappointing they didn't close it out.
Is there a time you felt it turned against you in that second half? Did you feel after having a chance to think?
I think the goal they got, where the sideline ball up there, which was contested, which it looked as if it was our line ball. I think that was a bad call. If the referee wasn't sure, linesman sure, hop the ball, but don't give a decision you're not sure of, because and then they got the goal off that, which is really disappointing, because it looked as if they had kicked the ball out. It was going over the side, and 2 boys contested. It was our ball. We didn't get it, and they scored that goal. And then they got a grip of the midfield, and our midfield was doing really well all day. And then we lost about 10 minutes of midfield, and they dominated, and they got their scores from.
Lachlan come on, had a couple of points to give you a wee bit of an injection, and even after that you still looked like you were going to pull away, so there was another turn.
Yeah, Lachlan did well. They come in. I thought our subs did, everybody come in did credit themselves well. And I think better than that there, I think that last score we worked to get a draw, it was brilliant, because like they had hit the score, like, or hit the goal, they're a point up, and then to create a score from a short kick out in the corner under serious pressure says a lot about the team as well. I thought it was very good. Because
you leaked the goal here against Kerry on day one, and then didn't get the kick out away, and then time it was a completely different set of circumstances.
Well, you're seeing yourselves, lads, this game's so much about kick-outs. Whoever controls midfield can control the game, and every time we want to kick out and into the attack, it looks as if we're going to create a score, both halves of the field, and both halves of the match. But when you lose midfield, it's very tough, and we're playing against a bit of a breeze. You know that you've Paul Conroy, Peter Cook come on, score a 2. Shane's always good for a 2 if he gets a chance. Comer come in, he's a handful inside. He won a couple of vital balls, and just Galway really come at us strong. So you have to give fair play to Galway too. They didn't quit the rate down, and they fought back. Just the game swung on big moments around midfield, and Galway got a bad him during that time.
Finally, for me, you're taking it to the last day. It's a biggie. It's Dublin, and it's the biggest game of all, I suppose, in the season.
I don't think it really mattered today. You know, we had to win. If we had won today, you go into the last game for the win anyway. You know, and if we had to come out with a result, it didn't matter. If you had lost the game today, you're probably going to try and beat Dublin to see could you come through in third place. So it's all up to play for the last match. It's great to be there. It's great to be an opportunity now that we can go at it. If we had lost that game today, it'd been very hard to pick those boys up after playing so well. But now we have 2 weeks to get ready for Dublin, but no, we look forward to that.
Thanks, Paddy.
Just been looking at today and a bit of bad luck. I thought we missed I think we had 4 or 5 goal chances, missed a lot. They hit 17 wides, but at least I would say 10 of those is well within their range, you know, the thing. So you could argue the bit out, like it would be closer or not closer. Like conversion rates are important. Like, you know, their wides will look bigger, but I think out of our 4 or 5 goal chances, I actually think Dublin scored 3 or 4 points off them. Like good saves, but you still want to be at least converting 1 or 2 of those, like if we're at this level. So definitely a mix of the good and the bad. But listen, with the way the other results went, you take it every day of the week. To be able to top the group is like testament to the way the boys have put the shoulder to the wheel. But I'd say now we'll have fun in the video session, honestly. I suppose that's why I love this system. You're just looking at the next game, like you're looking at the next point. And as you can see there, the way this game is played, like the minute we put that ball short, like Dublin were hungry to get a score because they know how much it means. Like, and we were the same against Derry. And again, I think it's why it's the best system that the GA has ever produced. But in a bid to pull things that have already passed us back, that we're going to change it. Like, I think it's a better. As I said, I think the whole system's better. I genuinely do. I think those week to weeks, it is hard. Like, but again, that was probably the argument for pre-season. Like, and let teams do their own pre-season. Like those days of flogging players and the stuff that I used to do is long gone. Thank God. Like, you know, your pre-seasons are they're mapped out like to the last degree. Like, so to have somebody who doesn't even know your players or their medical history or anything else to tell them what to do, like, I think plays a big part in that. But if you get the pre-season right, like that robustness in your players, it can last. It doesn't guarantee it, but no different than any sport, like professional or amateur. But I don't think it's. I don't think it's too much. No, like it's. Sometimes when you get the extra time in a game and you can be out the following week, that's a lot because you're basically playing 2 games in that one weekend. But in general, like, listen, sometimes you fall foul of it, sometimes you don't. But the cadence I think we have is pretty good. I do think the system we have works well, and we can't expect every game to be a clinker. We can't expect everything to be brilliant. Like, no different than whether it's Champions League or World Cup rugby. Like, there's going to be rounds and there's going to be games that like are poor. But I think what we've got is good. And in our sport, we have to respect the club level as well. At the minute, we seem to have that. Although most of the leagues are going on at the minute, and without a lot of the county players, but they're normally back in for the tail end of the leagues, an important part of it, and into the championship. So I don't know if we need to mess with it that much. I think we've done enough of that. But we're changing it again next year. But the cadence, I think, is pretty good. Look, Joey was back today, which was great. Joey McElroy got his point there again. Armagh is back, and Aidan Forker, like we had in the extended panel today, and I'm hoping they're going to push on for the next day as well. Aisling, look, just that calf thing, we didn't want to take the chance, but I'd be hopeful he'll be back for the Galway game. So, but you go back in today, and you'll see, like, it's like, Dublin are a big, strong, physical team. Like, and there's some big hits going on there. So, hopefully everybody will be okay. And, the 2 weeks this time, like, this is our 2-week break, so it'll give the chance for a bit of recovery for them and others to push in. Like, when you win a game, you have huge competition for places. That's the way the system works. Like, when you're winning, like, there's a huge push on, and like, it's better than any manager or coach I've ever seen when somebody's snapping at your heels for your position. Like, it makes you better at what you do. So, like, over the next 2 weeks, I know there's going to be fellas hungry to play. And that's the biggest advantage that'll give us. Like, that's no matter how many things I put in the wall, how many speeches I give, to what sort of tactics. When you have the intent of a man, like, raise another 10 or 15%, that's what you're looking for.